We are very pleased to have White House Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow in a Fox Business exclusive. Larry, great to see you. Glad to see you're inside. It's cold outside. Specifically regarding USMCA, what will this treaty do for growth that NAFTA couldn't?
Well, look, I mean, President outlined it very well, and a lot of the chapters in here are path-breaking, I hope will be templates for future trade deals. One of them is sort of new economy, old economy. Let me start there. In terms of the manufacturing automobile sector, we struck much better balance than the prior deal. Domestic content is higher. Certain wage content will also be higher. And a lot of labor rights that never existed before, a lot of environmental rights that never existed before. On the new economy side, and I confess this is my favorite, the intellectual property protection is going to be a major boost to technological advance and direct investment in the United States. That's a huge job creator right there. On top of that, we've expanded in the digital services area, the financial services area, the biologic area, and of course, I think as President mentioned, in agriculture, big breakthroughs, not an easy thing to do, I might add. Give Ambassador Lighthizer huge credit. On agriculture, we made some big breakthroughs on things like dairy products and wheat. In total, the International Trade Commission, the upper boundary of the potential for economic growth, David, 1% GDP increase, probably about 600,000 jobs, probably $100 billion of new investment. These are hard things to model and estimate, but they made the estimates. I'm just saying, from the standpoint of remedying some unbalances in the manufacturing sector and adding new economy breakthroughs in tech and elsewhere, this is going to be a tremendous deal. Okay. It is pro-growth.
Larry, Steve Forbes here. Any news on the European front? Is that going to go the way of the USMCA? We're not going to have a trade war, which is really the last big cloud on the horizon on the trade front.
Steve, we had a very good bilateral meeting in Davos with the new president of the EU. Very good meeting. And her trade minister, commissioner, Phil Hogan. And we've been in a lot of touch with Mr. Hogan. Ms. von der Leyen and President Trump, they got along very well. They talked about some urgency, putting some intensity behind it. It's going to be up to Ambassador Lighthizer at his discretion and wisdom to follow through. There are a lot of key areas there. Trade is very important with the United. It's funny. EU trade is actually, well, EU trade is a little more than North American trade. Both of them are twice as big as China trade. I don't know if people know that. That's why we've been pushing this USMCA. Can we get it done with the EU? I don't want to forecast, but I think you're going to see a kind of restarting of intensity, and that would be a good thing indeed.
Larry, hi, it's Liz Peek. Thanks for joining us tonight. Bernie Sanders is not at all happy with the USMCA. You may have heard that. He thinks there's a missing chapter, the one that really corrals oil and gas companies and prevents them, I'm quoting, dumping their environmental waste into Mexico. What is he talking about?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know I can answer that question. That's almost a metaphysical question. I'm not for socialism. I know Mr. Sanders. He was a guest on my old TV show. I respect him, but I completely disagree with his point of view. We're not going to destroy the gross domestic product of the United States. And, you know, clean burning fuel. How about the natural gas revolution? How about importing, exporting LNG, for example? Both Canada and the United States and Mexico have vibrant energy sectors, as you know. So Mr. Sanders' socialism model may win the primaries. I have no idea. I'm not smart enough to forecast, but it is not something that we will adopt, nor is it something this country should ever adopt.
And just to put a fine point on it, Larry Kudlow is not a socialist. Did I hear you right on that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a socialist. I am a free enterpriser. My boss is a free enterpriser, as he laid out in the Davos speech. He called it the American model of free enterprise, and we completely disagree and reject, with all due respect, Lord knows, Senator Sanders' view. We just, we're not there.
And Chairman Kudlow, it's Robert Wolf, and like you, you. I'm a capitalist as well, and I applaud the USMCA because I also was supportive of TPP and TTIP. But I got to ask you the tough one here. Today, the CBO announced that they forecast the deficit of $1 trillion for 2020. I mean, you've been a fiscal conservative, literally for as long as I've known you, which is over, maybe 30 years now. So what do you say about the CBO report, and how do you think that we can take this deficit on?
Well, look, the deficit's running about 5% of GDP. That's a manageable number in my judgment. We need strong economic growth to work our way through the deficit. It would also be nice to limit spending. About politics, the art of the possible. You can't always get the spending restraints you want. More on that in the future as politics work their way through. I want to just say this about the CBO report. Now, I have not read it carefully, but I have seen a couple of memos this morning that shows CBO has revised significantly higher its revenue estimates, such that not only have we paid for the corporate tax cut, we have virtually paid for the entire $1.5 trillion overall tax cut because of faster growth than they predicted. Nominal GDP has come in level higher than they predicted, and at average tax rates, that is essentially covering the tax cut. Now, I'm going to go through it myself with a fine-tooth comb. I've been in transit the last 24 hours, but I just find that an interesting point.
Very good point. Larry, I want to switch over to China because, as you know, government economist in China is warning that the virus there could drag down the economy. He says below the 5% growth level. Of course, if you trust Chinese figures, the point is it's coming down. We had Jerry Powell today saying that they're monitoring how it's going to affect their economy. And then we have Google saying that they're going to close all of their offices in China. How much is the administration, how much are you expecting this virus to affect the economy here?
Very little, as Jay Powell said today, minimal impact. This is a Chinese pandemic. And by the way, I want to note, we just had an Oval Office meeting covering a number of subjects, including this one. At China's invitation, the U.S. Secretary Azar is sending our best CDC experts over to China to work with the World Health Organization and the Chinese government. That's the first time we made that decision. We're happy to do it. It's part of our engagement with China. We want to help out in any way we can. We have a lot of very smart people that know how to deal with these public health issues. So we are going to send over a batch of CDC experts. Regarding these GDP estimates, David, I don't want to go there. It's going to be very difficult for China. The issue is that, Chinese got the virus. This is not going to have any major impact on the United States. I go back to, I guess it was 2003, the SARS epidemic. There's always a lot of pessimism and so forth, but it had virtually no impact on our economy. And I don't think this is going to change. This is a Chinese pandemic. We are going to do everything we can as Americans and American government, certainly, to help them to solve this as rapidly as possible.
Scott Martin?
Hey, Larry, it's Scott Martin from Chicago. With respect to that impact on China, of which there is going to be a decent or maybe even significant economic one, do you think that gives us, Larry, any more leverage with respect to a phase 2 part of the trade deal getting done faster and maybe more easier with China if they're struggling economically because of the coronavirus fallout?
Well, look, I don't want to mix these. I don't want to conflate these subjects. Look, China has a serious public health problem. I guess thousands of people are dying. We want to help them work through it, okay? We want to help them work through it. It's not about leverage and this and that. The United States and China reached a major historic phase 1 trade agreement. The two countries are engaging as never before. We have to work through issues on trade, on the economy, on human rights, on national security, and now on public health. Public health is going to stand alone. But that is the way we are looking at this. We want to save lives if we can and help them to get through this virus pandemic as soon as possible. That's it. It's a standalone issue. It's not related to leverage or anything else. We're just trying to help folks. It's a decent human instinct, and I don't want to overthink that.
Larry, you know how TV time is. We only have 20 seconds. When are we going to see tax cuts phase 2?
You mean tax cuts 2.0, I think.
Yeah. When are we going to see it? When are we going to see it rolled out?
I think sometime this summer during the campaign, we
Okay.
will lay it out. A lot of cooperation on all sides. You know it excites me. Tax cuts, lower tax rates, broader tax base. Steve Forbes invented it. I'm just following up on what he taught me down through the years.
The best we can do with Forbes is just keep pace with him on tax cuts. Absolutely. Larry Kudlow,
Thank you,
delight
Larry.
to see you again. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for
Appreciate
coming
it.
in.